Welcome to Chapter 4 video presentation on corporate teaming arrangements. This video presentation, just like all video presentations in this course, are based on project procurement management, contracting, subcontracting, teaming by Quentin Fleming. After completing this chapter, you should be able to accomplish the following. First of all, explain what teaming arrangements are in essence. Give some examples of teaming arrangements in the IT industry. Explain the difference between a partnership and a joint venture. Explain what strategic alliances are. Discuss the three common models of teaming arrangements. And then evaluate the three common models of teaming arrangements by being able to point or discuss the cons and pros of each model. Finally, you should be able to explain how to avoid antitrust legal action from the government when forming teaming arrangements. Now, before going into the main subject matter of Chapter 4, which is corporate teaming arrangements, let us step back a little bit and revisit the material that we covered in one of the previous chapters. As you can recall, in Chapter 2, we discussed the three generic procurement categories, such as major complexity procurements, minor complexity procurements, and routine buys of commercial off-the-shelf items or services. So those are the three main categories, and most procurement relationships in the context of project management, they fall into one of those three categories. Now, we also said that there are also special procurement relationships, meaning they're not, strictly speaking, they're not procurements. They're not what most people would say is a pure form of procurement. They're more like procurement-like relationships. And these special categories include procurements performed under strategic company teaming arrangements or interdivisional work involving procurements from other divisions of the company. So Chapter 4 is largely about the special procurement relationship number 1, procurements performed under strategic company teaming arrangements. So what is the essence of corporate teaming arrangements? How do they come about? One metaphor to explain what corporate teaming arrangements are like is the so-called arranged marriages metaphor. This is how it works. One executive will meet another executive, sometimes at a formal event or maybe at some informal event where they have a chance to chat. And during this formal or informal conversation, the two executives will decide that their firms should work together on a new project, on a project that will benefit both companies. So once this informal agreement is reached, then executives will introduce two project teams, with each team coming from the organization that they represent. They will introduce those two teams to each other and tell them to work together to make this relationship work. So by this stage, it's already a done deal in the sense that those two project teams, they're invited not to provide their opinion on whether the teaming arrangement is possible or impossible, whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense. Their goal is to make this work no matter what, right? Because the arrangement has been done already, so it's not up for discussions, okay? And sometimes it's a pity because a lot of those relationships, they end up very ugly, just like some marriages end up ugly, right? In a lot of times, the two companies working together, after some time, they realize that their cultures, usually it's about culture, about corporate culture, their cultures are just too incompatible. And although the project that they're trying to collaborate on looks great on paper, it's impossible to make it work because people just have different attitudes, different beliefs, different ways of doing things. And instead of cooperating, they just start fighting and hating each other. And there are plenty of examples like that in the history of corporate mergers. For example, Hewlett and Compaq, where Hewlett-Packard turned out to be a more dominant company with a stronger culture that eventually subdued Compaq completely. Recently, I've been following the story of the merger between United Airlines, headquartered in Chicago, and Continental Airlines, headquartered in Houston. The two companies merged together. United was the biggest partner, I believe, and that's why the new company is now called United, although some of the fleet and some of the employees come from Continental Airlines. And also, I've been reading that this merger did not work that well, that great. I've been reading that before the merger, Continental was a smaller company and it was also a more innovative company, more agile company, while United is a more traditional company, more conservative company. And then the culture of United, because of the size, and maybe because of the cultural dominance of United Airlines, it tends to dominate Continental Airlines employees to the point where some employees sometimes say that they come from Continental. They want to they want to differentiate themselves from the rest of the employees, thinking that they're better, that they're different, that they're not compatible with the United Airlines culture. So this seems to be creating problems up to now, although the merger happened a few years ago, I believe. Now, where do companies come from? In other words, like what is their reasoning when they decide to form some kind of corporate arrangement or strategic partnership, as opposed to just buying a competitor or merging two companies together and forming one legal entity, as United Airlines or HP did in the past? Now, the thing is, this is why they do those corporate teaming arrangements. Both the US Department of Justice and the European Union have strong antitrust laws. Okay, to make it very simple, antitrust laws, they are meant to prevent monopolies, where one company becomes too dominant in the industry, in the marketplace, and because of that dominance, the company can dictate the prices. And if a company can dictate prices, if it's a monopoly, then what happens usually is that everybody loses, the society loses as a whole, meaning consumers pay higher prices because there's no competition, there's only one company. Consumers also end up getting lower quality. Also, lack of competition prevents progress. There's no point in investing into new innovative products or technologies because consumers are buying anyway. So there is this belief, and I think it's true. Most of the time there's that belief that trusts or monopolies, they're bad for the society, they're bad for the economy. And trust means it's like a coalition or joint efforts of two companies to merge together to increase their power, their market power. And most countries, they have laws against that. In other words, they don't want any kind of alliances that lead to a monopoly or close to monopoly situation in the marketplace, because once again, they believe it's something that is harmful to the society. So it's very hard to legally merge nowadays, because you have to go through all those antitrust legislative approvals. In some countries, you actually need to get like almost permission from the president or from the prime minister or from one of the ministers that is responsible for one particular sector in order to merge two companies together, or in order for one company to acquire another company. And those activities, those transactions are called M&A, or mergers and acquisitions, where two companies either merge together to form one single entity, or one company acquires another one, which is called an acquisition. So because of the legal difficulties and bureaucracy surrounding all this, corporate mergers and acquisitions are becoming less common. And instead of corporate mergers and acquisitions, companies form strategic alliances using various corporate teaming arrangements. This is common nowadays in all industry, but especially in IT. So here's an example of a corporate teaming arrangement from the IT industry. You can pause this video for a minute and read it. So this is one example of a corporate teaming arrangement from the IT industry. Electronic Data Systems, or EDS, was awarded a far-reaching contract valued as much as $6.9 billion over 8 years to revamp the US Navy and Marine Corps computer system. And in order to work on this project, EDS formed partnerships with WorldCom and Raytheon Company. So in other words, they decided to somehow work together, to collaborate together on this project. Now, not the different. It's not a merger. It's not an acquisition. Meaning, Electronic Data Systems, they did not acquire WorldCom. They did not merge with them, right? They just decided to temporarily form a team, cross-organizational team, to work on this project for the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. Okay, so that's why it's not a joint venture. It's not a merger between companies. It's not an acquisition. It's really like a corporate teaming arrangement. It's an arrangement to work together. Now, this is a common definition of a corporate teaming arrangement: an arrangement of two or more firms to form a partnership or joint venture to act as a potential prime contractor, or an arrangement by a potential prime contractor to act as a subcontractor under a specified acquisition program, or an agreement for a joint proposal resulting from a normal prime contractor, subcontractor, licensee, licensor, or leader company relationship. Now, this definition may sound a bit complex. There are different forms, but we will see some examples and specific models that illustrate those forms in more detail. And here you have a definition of a teaming arrangement from the US government. So you can pause this video for a minute and read this definition. It's slightly more expanded. So as you can tell from these two definitions, a teaming arrangement is some kind of partnership, right? Now, those terms like partnership or joint venture, they have precise legal meaning in the world of business, in the legal world. So partnership is actually a form of an organization for doing business. So an ordinary partnership occurs when two or more entities or people combine capital or services to carry on business for profit. From a legal standpoint, it is a group of separate persons. So a typical partnership is something along the lines of a law firm. So you have a company, it's called, I don't know, Johnson and Sons, something like that, which means that the head of the family or the head of the company, Mr. Johnson, is working with several other people who are also Johnson. So it could be like Johnson and Johnson, right? So sometimes you have three names, three last names. And also, although you may have three names in the name of a law firm, this doesn't prevent other lawyers to be a part of this partnership, right? So basically it means something like this. You have a bunch of people working together under one roof as if they were one single company. But from a legal standpoint, they're separate people. I mean, their profit sharing, the way they share profits, the way they pay tax is separate, right? They don't pay tax as one legal entity. Each lawyer pays his or her own tax, something like that. And then the profits are also distributed separately to the partners of the company. Okay, so this is a partnership. Now, in the world of purchasing and supply chain management, a partner is a firm with whom your company has an ongoing buyer-seller relationship involving a commitment over an extended time period, mutual sharing of information, and a sharing of risks and rewards resulting from the relationship. What I'm trying to say here is that when we say partnership here, right, we don't mean that legal partnership, this legal form of organizing for doing business, okay? So for example, in most states you can register your company as a partnership. It's not like that. It doesn't have to be registered as a partnership. It's more like a collaboration, right? So when we say a partnership, we don't really mean like a legal form of corporate of business organization for running a business. So sometimes it's just like a relationship, right? Not a legal relationship, but like a cooperative relationship. Now, also another form of collaboration or teaming arrangement that was mentioned in one of the definitions is a joint venture. So what is a joint venture? It's an enterprise owned and operated by two or more businesses or individuals as a separate entity for the mutual benefit of the members of the group. Joint ventures possess the characteristics of joint control, joint property, joint liability for losses and expenses, and joint participation in profits. Joint ventures can be either incorporated or unincorporated. So this is how it works. When two companies this is how a joint venture works. Two companies want to collaborate together, and in order to collaborate, they set up a separate company, a separate entity, okay? And this separate entity is actually working on the project that the two founding companies agree to collaborate on, okay, as a separate company. Now, there are some nuances as to what extent this company is separate, to what extent it's controlled by the partners. So there are many variations of the exact joint venture arrangement. Sometimes a joint venture is completely independent. So two companies, they pull together funds, they put together expertise, they establish this company, and then they let this company run on its own. Sometimes it's done to avoid corporate influence, to create a company with a new product, new culture, right? So for example, let's say if an auto manufacturer wants to, let's say Volkswagen is known for relatively low quality, low price cars, then in order to form a luxury brand, they may partner up, let's say, with Armani. And once they partner up with Armani, they let this company run separately. They don't want executives from Volkswagen Group somehow controlling the way the company operates, because they believe that if that happens, if this company can exercise control, if Volkswagen can exercise control over the new joint ventures, then they will fail to produce a luxury vehicle, because they will dictate that they use like low quality, low price materials and parts and stuff like that. So that was not the original intention behind this partnership. Or sometimes a joint venture formally has a control mechanism where two partnering organizations control and dictate the way the joint venture operates. So it depends. It depends on what are the goals behind this arrangement for which a joint venture was formed. Now, also here, most of the time when we talk about teaming arrangements, we mean strategic alliance. So it's not this strict legal partnership. It's not a strict legal joint venture. It's some kind of relationship between two companies, and that does not have to be either a partnership or joint venture. Okay, and it can take all kinds of forms, and those forms are commonly placed under the umbrella of strategic alliance. So the strategic alliance is the party's own creation. There are few laws constraining the teams to which the parties can agree. Parties to a strategic alliance agreement, therefore, need to be careful to state fully the terms of their alliance. So it means that if two companies do not wish to fall under the legislature related to partnership or joint venture, they can still collaborate. They can still collaborate without those legal mechanisms. And in that case, it will be called a strategic alliance. Strategic alliances are not strictly regulated by any legislatures, because if you're talking about partnership or joint venture, there are specific laws that explain how risks are shared, how liabilities are shared, how those arrangements are taxed, how profits should be shared. There are some strict laws regarding governance, and stuff like that. For a strategic alliance, it's more loose. It's really up to you and your partner how you want to get things organized. So some common teaming arrangements under strategic alliance, or maybe some other form too, maybe under joint venture or partnership, are as follows. But usually, as I mentioned before, we're talking about strategic alliances, which means loose collaborations that most likely are not partnerships or joint ventures. So Model 1 is a teaming arrangement creating a superior-subordinate relationship, and we'll see an example like that. Model 2 is teaming arrangements involving partners. And Model 3, performance on a single project without a teaming arrangement. So it's like an ad hoc group of companies, and it's not clear who is the boss, who is the superior, who is the subordinate. You kind of let the companies figure out how to work together without establishing any kind of formal governance mechanism. In this slide, you see an example of Model 1 superior-subordinate relationship teaming arrangement. The most important characteristic of this teaming arrangement is that there is a prime contractor. In our case, the company's name is Computer Sciences Corporation. So this prime contractor signs an agreement with the United States Air Force to carry out a particular project. Now, under this arrangement, Computer Sciences Corporation has a subcontracting relationship with Dynacorp and General Physics, two other companies. But as far as the United States Air Force is concerned, it is Computer Sciences Corporation that is in charge of the project. So they don't deal with the partners that Computer Sciences Corporation has teamed up with, such as Dynacorp and General Physics. So the defining characteristic is that there is a superior contractor, superior organization, and then everybody else participating in this teaming arrangement is a subordinate to the superior main contractor, which is once again Computer Sciences Corporation. So let's look at some other characteristics of this Model 1 superior-subordinate relationship. So as it was mentioned before, everybody knows who is ultimately responsible for the project or who is the principal contractor. In our case, it's Computer Sciences Corporation, or CSC. CSC buys some of the project scope from two teaming members, Dynacorp and General Physics. Normally, competition is excluded for the duration of the project. That means that CSC agrees to work with Dynacorp and General Physics for the duration of the project without introducing any new companies. So there is a certain level of security for Dynacorp and General Physics, knowing that their prime contractor, their superior company, will not engage in any kind of additional relationship, so that Dynacorp and General Physics do not have to compete with any other organizations for the duration of the project. So normally competition is excluded. Now CSC has a separate relationship, meaning that excludes US Air Force with two teaming members mentioned before, Dynacorp and General Physics. Executive support is essential for fostering the relationship among the teaming members. In other words, within every company, there needs to be a powerful executive who supports the relationship, approves the relationship, and does everything that she or he can do in order to make that relationship work. Sometimes the principal company will trade places with a subordinate company on a different project. So most of the time, it's a matter of expertise. If CSC feels that on a different project they want to team up with the same companies, but it doesn't have the required expertise to be the prime contractor, then their roles may be changed. And let's say Dynacorp will become the primary contractor, and then Computer Sciences Corporation and General Physics will be subordinates in this particular teaming arrangement. It is often done for this kind of arrangement is often done for marketing purpose, depending on which company is more likely to win the contract from the buying customer. In other words, the company who becomes the prime contractor is the company who has the most recognizable brand or name, has the most perceived expertise to win a particular project. So once this company wins project, the company will distribute the work or the scope of the project with some other partners, depending on their expertise and depending on the nature of the project. So sometimes the role of a superior or prime contractor is assigned based on the likelihood of whether this company can win a particular contract or not. Model 2 involves equal partners. So here, United States Navy commissions two companies, McDonnell Douglas and General Dynamics, to work on a particular project. The contract can be written in such a way where each of the companies is responsible for approximately 50% of the scope. Under this arrangement, there is no clear prime contractor. Both companies are on equal terms. So yeah, in this case, a buying customer, US Navy, issues a single prime contract to two companies, and each firm is expected to perform its own share of the previously agreed upon scope. Now, while this arrangement makes things simpler on the buying customer side, only one contract is issued for two companies, the communication interface and the lines of authority and responsibility become blurred. The most important problem is this: it is unclear who should report to whom and who is ultimately responsible if the project goes wrong. So if the project goes wrong, there's a big chance, there's a big probability that the two companies will start blaming each other and nobody will accept the responsibility for losses or the responsibility for making things right so that the project is actually delivered. So there's no and then you have model 3 without a teaming arrangement. So there's no formal teaming arrangement. There's no clear division of authority and responsibility. The project's bar expects that somehow all the companies chosen for a particular project will work together in a cooperative, harmonious way under their overall guidance and direction. An example of Model 3 would be British Petroleum outsourcing its IT function. They outsourced its IT function to a number of companies, and those companies were supposed to work together and figure out on their own how to provide high-quality, seamless IT services to British Petroleum. So basically, the overall direction coming from BP was seamless IT services. There were 3 separate contracts, one for each vendor. The stated intent was for 3 companies to work out their own communication and cooperation interface and minimize BP involvement. Now, the arrangement worked adequately for several years, but because those companies could find a synergetic way to work with each other and contribute to BP's IT services from their own niches. But there were difficulties as well. Contracts did not necessarily encourage cooperation. Sometimes companies, instead of cooperating, they become competitors within the same contract, within the same project. And also sometimes things, because there are no clear lines of authority and responsibility, some things fell inside the cracks among vendors, meaning some things kind of fall through. It's not clear who should be responsible for taking care of those things, those issues. And that's another issue that has been experienced by BP because of this arrangement. So which model is the best? Now, Model 3 sounds like, from a first impression, Model 3 sounds like the worst model. It's like throwing the entire responsibility of management on somebody else and no one in particular, and hoping that somehow it will work out. But yet, a counter argument to that is that Model 3 fosters natural synergies among vendors. They will find the best way to work together instead of you trying to, as a customer, trying to wrap your head around the entire project and trying to figure out the best way for them to work together. Sometimes life is the best teacher, and it is through experience that companies can figure out the best way of collaborating on a particular project. Model 1 seems to be traditional and strong, yet some argue that the principal contractor may demand a management fee and it will make the project unnecessarily expensive. So that's the downside. Now, while Model 2 can be used to clearly divide project scope among teaming companies, let's say through some legal mechanism, let's say by signing a contract, the issue of diffused authority and responsibility still remains. In other words, it's not clear who makes the final decision, who is ultimately responsible for the work, who bears losses, who assumes risks, and stuff like that. Probably Model 1 is the best in the sense that it's the most traditional one. It's the old and true way of making things work, where you have a boss and you have subordinates. So probably Model 1 is appropriate for most of the scenarios. At the end, it's worth reflecting on antitrust laws and their implications for various teaming arrangements. It was mentioned in the beginning of this video presentation that most countries have legislation in place designed to encourage competition among companies and prevent monopolies from being formed. The belief is that once a monopoly is formed, meaning once a company becomes too dominant, then the company will dictate prices, and this is something that will hurt consumers, it will hurt the society as a whole. Sometimes if it's a strategic industry, something related to utilities or let's say gas, oil products, then those high prices can impact not just consumers of this company but the entire economy, because gas prices is something that is included in the price of most products and services. So the entire economy will suffer, and then the monopoly will stop innovating, will stop changing, because why would they invest into new products, new technologies, when they know that their customers have nowhere else to go? But the general definition of trusts is as follows. Trust associations of people, organizations having the intention and power or the tendency to create a monopoly, control production, or to fix and regulate the supply and the price of goods and services. In other words, to be noticed by the government and to have antitrust legislation applied to you as an organization, you don't need to reach the monopoly position. In other words, if there is a tendency, if it looks like it, that by forming a particular partnership you will start influencing prices and acting as a near monopoly, that should be enough for most antitrust bodies to intervene and take you to court. One example of a famous antitrust saga, I would say, because it had been dragging for so many years, were all those court cases against Microsoft and against their monopoly position in the operating system market. Now, strictly speaking, Microsoft was never a monopoly. I mean, it was never the only operating system out there. Yet, the government and the other IT companies who were competing with Microsoft, they believed that it was a near monopoly, that through its practices, through its partnerships, Microsoft was actually trying to create a situation where it is a monopoly, close to a monopoly in the market of operating systems. So I remember there were a lot of lawsuits in 1990s against Microsoft, and Bill Gates personally represented Microsoft as a witness, I believe, and he would speak on behalf of Microsoft and try to make a point as to why they don't have the characteristics of a trust. So giving how sensitive some governments are in relation to organizations forming trusts or monopolies, it is important to keep in mind that teaming arrangements should not resemble trusts. Otherwise, the government may fine, dissolve, or even imprison the participating parties. I'm not a lawyer to have a granular understanding of this issue, but I know in the United States there is a principle. There's a principle that even if you are using some other legal mechanisms or other definitions of what you're doing, but if in principle it resembles a trust, then they will apply antitrust legislations against you. So no matter how creative you are avoiding some of the, legal characteristics of a trust, if whatever you're doing still resembles a trust, then that should be enough of a reason for somebody to prosecute you in court based on antitrust legislation.